Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I wanted to talk about something that I think is just so important, and it's what I consider to be one of the most dangerous things in the whole language learning process, and that is comparing yourself to other people. And it's not just with language learning, it's in life in general, right? It's just something that's so dangerous and that you really should try to avoid, to the best of your ability. So you'll actually see a lot of this in the language learning community, unfortunately, because there's a lot of examples of people, speaking 15 languages or claiming to speak 15 languages, whether that's on YouTube, internet forums, or whatever. And it could even be just something as so simple in your life, like maybe you know someone that's trilingual or, knows 4 languages or whatever it is. And I think there's just some things to think about before, judging and judging yourself and comparing yourself. So the first thing to think about is just, are the claims that I'm looking at realistic? Are they real? You'd be surprised that, a lot of people that claim to speak so many languages really aren't fluent or competent, right? It's one thing to make a video where you say 10 sentences, and you kind of jump cut everything. But it's another to pass a certified language exam or make someone read something and really test those abilities. So you might have this impression that certain people have a skill level or competency that they really just ultimately don't have. And that really applies to not just YouTube, but people in real life too, right? Like I think a lot of people tend to overestimate their abilities with language learning, and just things in general. So the thing to think about first is, maybe the thing that you're comparing yourself to isn't even really the truth, right? Maybe that skill level is not as high as you think. The second thing is that, does it even matter, right? Does it matter that someone knows 4 languages and you know like only 1? It doesn't matter. What's important is your own progress, right? The only time you really should be comparing yourself is if it's going to help you to learn something or get better, right? Like if somebody has a study routine that's really awesome and you can learn from something from that by comparing it to your own and seeing where you can improve, that's awesome, right? Or maybe you see something that they're doing that's great. It's a great new study method and you want to pick that up. Awesome. But really at that point, leave it at that, right? Because anything on the level of skill, competency, how awesome they are, that's where you run into danger territory, because it's so easy to, now start to be hard on yourself, right? Maybe you're not working hard enough. Maybe, you're not good at learning languages and you feel bad, and that's going to hurt your motivation. But even outside of language learning, it's hurting your internal confidence when it shouldn't, right? It doesn't matter what other people are doing, right? It doesn't matter if they're learning 3 languages at once. You don't know how successful they are in that process. You don't know how much work they're putting in. There's so many variables and assumptions with comparison where you just don't know what's going on, right? You don't know how much effort they're putting in. You don't know how competent they are. So, don't do that, because you don't know all of the pieces of information when you're comparing yourself. And like I said again, to reiterate, it doesn't matter, right? What's important is your own progress. Be excited and happy, that you're making progress. It doesn't matter if someone knows 4 languages or 5 languages. It just doesn't matter. And I think for some people, it's going to be obvious, right? They're like, oh yeah, of course, I don't really care. I don't care. But there's going to be people obviously out there that do care. And they maybe they say they don't care, but then they catch themselves in that comparison mode, and it's just this bad spiral, before you know it, you lost motivation or just you get negative thoughts in your mind. I think the other thing to think about is just that, not everyone starts at the same starting position, right? And this just kind of goes back to this idea of you don't have all the information of the story, right? Obviously, if someone grew up traveling and living in, a foreign country, right, they're going to have a leg up. They're going to have that experience that maybe you didn't grow up with. Maybe, they grew up in 5 different countries and they have that exposure and experience that you didn't have. And does it matter? Not really, but they have that advantage over you. Maybe, their parents were very, a bilingual household and they picked up a language that way. Maybe they just had that desire. They, and they had been learning languages since they were 12, and after 10 years, they've picked up all of all those languages after that time, and you've only been doing it for a year. Regardless, you just don't know those pieces of information, and comparing yourself, it's not an apples to apples, it's an apples to oranges. You have a different upbringing, you have a different background, where you were located, and it doesn't matter, right? Like, while someone might know 4 languages, you might be more well-rounded. You might have an interest in music, you might have things that you're successful at that they're not successful at. So these are like, this, I think, goes beyond just language learning. It's critical to life, right? Because it's so easy to compare ourselves in so many different aspects, right? Whether that's work, relationships, and you just don't know the whole story. And focus on yourself, because that comparison just leads to a dark road, whether that's language learning or life in general, right? There's going to be times where maybe you can use that as a superiority method, right? It's like, oh, I'm better than this person. But the way life goes is that, generally speaking, there's probably always someone a little bit better, a little bit, more skilled or whatever. And it's a dangerous, slippery slope, especially with language learning, where there's a ton of people out there that know a lot of languages, and some of them pretty well, and it's just ultimately not serving you, right? So if you want to learn a language, try to avoid that, because it's just not helpful. Learn the techniques that they're doing and take advantages, but be careful, because it's just a slippery slope with motivation and overall confidence. So that's all I had. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.